All right, let's dive into one of the world's great epics, the Ramayana. But we're going to look at it through a really different lens. There's this fascinating scholarly interpretation that argues the second half of the epic, well, it isn't just myth. It's actually a memory of real history, just waiting to be unlocked.
So, here's the big question we're tackling today. We all know the Ramayana is filled with these incredible things, right? Flying chariots, monkey armies, divine weapons. But what if all those fantastical elements aren't just fantasy? What if they're actually poetic descriptions of real Iron Age events? You know, like a kind of code that we can actually crack.
Okay, so to really get this interpretation, the first thing you have to realize is that the Ramayana isn't just one seamless story. It really is a tale of two very, very different halves.
And you can see the contrast right here. I mean, it's pretty stark. The first half of the epic, it's a grounded story. It's all about court politics, family drama, exile. It feels really human. But then, after Sita is abducted, everything changes. The whole texture of the story just flips. It explodes into large-scale warfare, mind-blowing engineering, and all these seemingly supernatural events. And that dramatic shift? That's the absolute key to this whole analysis.
So, you have to ask, why the sudden change in tone? Well, the argument we're exploring is that history itself is actually hiding right there, inside the myth.
And the idea here is that this isn't some kind of storytelling mistake. No, it's a feature of how our own human memory works, especially when we're processing intense, traumatic events, like a war. You can think of it as mythic elevation. The memory of a huge, world-changing conflict becomes sacred over time, and the people involved, the heroes, their actions get elevated into the realm of the superhuman. It's a natural process.
So the goal here isn't to just dismiss the second half of the Ramayana and say, oh, that's just fantasy. Not at all. The real challenge, the interesting part, is to try and peel back those layers of poetic description to see if we can find a plausible historical reality hiding underneath. It's really an act of decoding, not just rejecting the story. All right, so let's actually put this theory to the test. How does this whole decoding process work when you apply it to the most famous, most magical parts of the epic? Let's find out.
Okay, first up, the Pushpaka Vimana. You know, Ravana's legendary flying chariot. We all know the popular image, but the proposed historical meaning is, well, it's a lot more grounded. It suggests it was an elite, highly decorated vehicle, and most likely a kind of ceremonial ship. And get this, the clues are right there in the language itself. In early Sanskrit, the word vimana just means a conveyance, or maybe a mobile pavilion. And pushpaka, that just means splendid or ornate. So Pushpaka Vimana literally translates to ornate royal transport. And if you look at the descriptions in the epic, they consistently focus on its size, its comfort, its sheer grandeur, not on any engines or mechanics of flight. And here's the final piece of that puzzle. Just imagine for a second, if you're from an inland kingdom and you watch this huge, sophisticated ship depart quickly over the horizon, disappearing into that blurry line where the sea meets the sky. Isn't it easy to see how that memory could be retold poetically as a vehicle ascending into the heavens? It makes a lot of sense.
All right, next up, what about that famous monkey army? This is a big one. But the term Vanara itself offers a massive clue. See, it breaks down into two parts. Vana, which means forest, and Nara, which means people. So Vanara, it literally means people of the forest.
Now, that completely reframes the entire alliance, doesn't it? Suddenly, it's not about an exiled prince teaming up with actual animals. Instead, it's a classic Iron Age political move. You've got a state power, led by Rama, forming a strategic alliance with these non-state tribal warrior groups who happen to control all the southern terrain. And their animal traits? They're probably symbolic descriptions of their skills or character. Think about Jambavan, the wise bear. He's probably not a literal bear, but the elder strategist, the keeper of tribal memory, represented by an animal that symbolizes strength and wisdom.
Okay, so now we have our human army of forest dwellers, but they still have a huge problem. They need to get to Lanka. And this brings us to one of the most incredible parts of the epic, one of its greatest engineering marvels, the bridge built across the sea, the Rama Setu. So the question is, how on earth could this have been built without magic?
Well, it's possible that the epic actually preserves the memory of a very real and very clever Iron Age engineering project. And the process described is actually pretty plausible. You'd start with the existing chain of limestone shoals that already exist between India and Sri Lanka. Then you build them up with boulders, you reinforce the whole structure with timber and vegetation, and, this is the clever part, you time the most difficult construction to happen during seasonal low tides. It's a massive undertaking, for sure, but it is totally within the realm of human-scale engineering.
But wait, you might be thinking, what about the famous floating stones? And that is a fantastic detail, right? Well, it turns out the stones used were likely porous coral limestone, which is really common in that region. And because of all the air trapped inside, these stones can, and actually do, temporarily float before they get waterlogged and sink. I mean, how perfect is that? It's the perfect little scientific fact to give rise to this amazing poetic memory of magically floating stone.
Okay, so let's take a step back and put all these decoded pieces back together. When we do that, what kind of picture of a real Iron Age war starts to emerge?
Well, when you look at the core structure of the conflict, it aligns almost perfectly with the known patterns of Iron Age warfare. You've got a coalition of different forces. You get critical, game-changing intelligence from a high-level defector, in this case, Ravana's own brother, Vibhishana. You have a major engineering feat to cross a huge geographic barrier, and all of that is followed by a siege and elite one-on-one combat. This is a classic textbook template for ancient warfare.
So this completely reframes the whole conflict. It stops being this cosmic battle between gods and demons for the fate of the entire universe. Instead, it becomes a decisive regional war with a very clear, very political goal: to remove a rival ruler, Ravana, who controlled this fortified power in the south, and then install a friendly leader in his place.
Which brings us to our final, and maybe most crucial question. If this was a real war, why does it feel so magical? How exactly does history transform into legend?
Well, the source material we're looking at suggests a pretty clear process. See, after a major war, societies have to find a way to make sense of the trauma. So the conflict itself is made sacred. Its heroes are idealized, and their abilities get exaggerated over time. And then, over centuries and centuries of retelling, poets and priests add these devotional layers, which amplify all the miraculous elements even more. In a way, the epic's uneven texture, that shift from human drama to mythic battle, is the best evidence of this layering process.
And this quote really just captures the essence of the whole argument perfectly. Myth, in this view, isn't a falsehood. It's not a lie. It's the way a culture makes sense of its most profound, most important historical experiences. It takes a real event and imbues it with a timeless meaning.
You know, in the end, looking at the Ramayana this way doesn't diminish its power at all. If anything, it restores its deep human core, the memory of real people facing a real terrifying crisis. And it leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought, doesn't it? How will the great, defining events of our own time be remembered 3,000 years from now? What kind of mythic elevation will transform our history into the epics of the future?